Welcome back. You're watching Inside Politics. It's the top of the hour. We continue discussing about the top political developments that have happened in the course of the week. Right before the break, we're deliberating on matters to do with the principal secretaries who were forwarded to by PSC. President William Ruto actually giving the go-ahead. The vetting process set to be conducted by the Parliament. And equally, we're taking a look at the gist when it comes to that list. Regional representation, gender balance, whatnot, including roadside declarations that have been made by various cabinet secretaries as the administration takes shape. Dismas Mukua, you take before we shift focus to Martin's National Assembly. Briefly. Yeah, in my view, when President Ruto is making these appointments, I suspect that he's got a matrix of the bare minimum for principal secretaries. That the bare minimum, number one, must be Chapter 6. The bare minimum must be Article 10. And the bare minimum must be capacity and competence. Those are very strong building blocks that are, if you meet those three, then you are good to go. But now when you're talking about the tribal representation, then in my view, that would be the secondary level. Because if you've got a team which has got capacity and competence to deliver, then Kenyans are going to be very excited. Because you have just learned that the president may actually come from your village, but you're going to suffer from food insecurity. But always, wherever any appointment is going to be made by President Ruto from now for the next 5 or 10 years, there is going to be opposition, because there are people whose raison d'etre today is whatever the president does, you find fault in it. Whatever the president does, you find fault in it. So that is something that we need to get used to. And then number two, I think now the Azimio, they need to socialize with the Kenya Kwanza manifesto into detail using a toothpick so that they can offer a loyal opposition, because they're the ones who are supposed to have a matrix of all the promises made, and then they keep on ticking which ones have been met and which ones have been ignored. So if they don't read the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, they'll be shooting from the dark. Well, we understand there should be a shadow cabinet. Let's wait and see.
Whether it will capture the face of Kenya.
Exactly. Anyway, let's shift focus now to matters National Assembly and perhaps the Senate as well. Get this, Kenya Kwanza allied leaders have strongly condemned Azimio la Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga's statements that President William Ruto's government has failed in implementing their promise to Kenyans. Led by National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, the legislators shifted the blame to Odinga, whom they accuse of corrupting the Jubilee agenda through his handshake with former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Bramwell Bwire now reports.
Just a day after the opposition leader Raila Odinga addressed the nation on his identified failures by President William Ruto's government, leaders allied to President Ruto have responded.
You are the one who presided over the state capture of our economy. You condoned it. You oversaw it. You helped those who have plundered our economy over the last 4 years. And the state of our economy, I also want to remind Mr. Odinga, it is worse off than President Mwai Kibaki took over in 2003. But you cannot compare the ruin of the Moi and Kanu regime over 24 years to the ruin of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga as the handshake administration of the last 4 years.
While attending a maize mill launch in Kigoto, Homa Bay County, nominated MP John Mbadi said President Ruto should learn from the previous regimes on how to run the government instead of what he termed as complaining.
Any government comes to power and starts collecting taxes the following day. When we came in as NAC with Kibaki, there was no money in the state coffers. But wonders, a lot was accomplished within a very short time. Even in Grand Coalition government, there was no money. A lot was accomplished. Today, Ruto, please indicate signs that you want to give services to our people by delivering services.
Apart from the state of the economy, Azimio leaders have slammed the government's fight against extrajudicial killings.
When a government is put in place, the next thing the government is doing is to victimize the former officers. People will be scared. They will not work for government. Tomorrow Ruto will be out. We don't want to victimize victimize his officers. Let him not victimize Kinoti. Let him not victimize Matiang'i, because I know the target is not those young men who have been arrested. The target is Kinoti and the target is Matiang'i, and we know it, we hear it from them.
Hatuwezi tulia tunyamaze tuseme kwamba sasa tusameheane, hakuna kuongea hayo, hakuna mtu anafaa kupelekwa kotini. Hayo hatuwezi. Hata vile tunasema kwamba lazima tufanye hili, ni vema pia wale ambao waliohusika na maneno ya uhalifu wawe ndani ya serikali sasa hivi, ama wale ambao walikuwa ndani ya serikali ambayo ilipita lazima wakamatwe na wapelekwe kotini.
If the fight against extrajudicial killings in the country will be achieved, it is a matter of time. Bramwell Bwire, KTN News.
Okay, so that story sort of paints a picture of the sort of week it has been within the National Assembly and in extension the Senate, Parliament. Definitely been a busy week. And if I could take a different angle, be that as it may, the process to amend the law to anchor the annulled National Government Constituency Development Fund in the Constitution equally kicked off just this week in Parliament. And the bill is proposing a couple of radical changes, increasing NG-CDF KT to at least 5% of total national revenue. The current law sets aside 2.5%. It's proper to highlight that. The bill also provides establishment of the Senate Oversight Fund, which seeks an allocation of 0.001% of all national government share. So perhaps let's start with the lawyer. Well, what's the importance of entrenching NG-CDF and these funds in the Constitution?
Yeah, because you see, it was really annulled previously. And it's important that members of parliament go through a process of entrenching it into the law, into the Constitution. I don't think that was the major issue by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was concerned that these members of parliament who are politicians are the patrons of this kitty. And I think that is why it was nullified, in the sense that this money should be administered by the national government. The method of, taking it down and ensuring that it has done its work should be controlled by the national treasury and not necessarily the members of parliament. That's where the elephant is. If you are going to give members of parliament, now they are saying 5%. Most constituencies are receiving about 100 million. Plus or minus, it means we are going to receive in a constituency 200 million plus or minus.
Yeah.
I mean, that is huge money. And a member of parliament, the problem is, and we know it, because once they have been elected and gone to the National Assembly, you hardly know where they live, you hardly get them. So they start to reward their cronies. They really want to know who supported me. Put him the administrator of ABC. Who supported me? Give him that class to build. So this is then not going to allow this fund to reach the mashinani, the correct people who should utilize it. So I think the National Assembly priority on ensuring that this is brought back as the opinion of the Supreme Court is okay. But assuming or leading people to believe that members of parliament should again be they are what actually now? They are the sponsors or patrons, That is not correct. The system should be such that the members of parliament are kept off.
Okay, but it's not like they pocket this money as it stands right now.
It's not pocketing. It's the question of allocation and how they do it. They are human beings. They will allocate some of it to a few friends. The way, and we have a history on how money is withdrawn from the national kitty by the patrons. So I think the main issue that concerns the Supreme Court is that money should be managed properly through the national treasury and not under the members of parliament.
Okay.
As it is, the members of parliament just meddle with that money illegally, because there's no provision in the law, that allows members of parliament to even touch, to even appoint, or even supervise what is done with this money. They are only supposed to provide oversight and say that this is what the national CDF officials have done in my county. This is the extent to which it is wrong. The advantage they have is because they are members of parliament, they can actually commission most of these projects in their constituency, in which case they draw some political capital out of that.
Okay.
But the fact that it is members of parliament who are pushing for NG-CDF is in itself a conflict of interest, because one, this is money from the national government. it is being devolved to constituencies, which is in conflict with, the whole idea of devolution, which the national government CDF Act of 2015 was to cure. What it didn't cure is the role of MPs and the extent to which MPs interfere with the constituency communities. I've done a study on national government CDF and how it is perceived. And to a large extent, there are so many MPs who are operating in the national government CDF as just MPs who are oversighting, ensuring that the process benefits the people. But there are some who are meddling. And I think that's where we are caught between a rock and a hard place.
All right.
How do you remove all the MPs out of this? Because legislation does not even allow MPs to interfere with the national government CDF. All they do is that they help in the mapping of the key projects. It comes all the way to the national government CDF board in Nairobi. And it is the board that disburses the money.
Okay.
It doesn't go to the MP, it goes to the constituency committee. But be it as it may, whatever they have to do, national government CDF has helped Kenyans a great deal. If there is something that can be done to ensure that it remains, and it is not 100 million, I can tell you without any fear of contradiction that the financial year 2020-2021, it was 137 million for each and every constituency. Now, if you lose that 137 million for a constituency like Suna East, such a big amount of money for people who depend on national government CDF to go to school. Now you listen to the Cabinet Secretary for Education, university students will have their fees increased, because if universities have to look for more money elsewhere from the government, what they are doing right now, and what most universities have done, even accommodation fee has increased by more than 100%. And it is CDF that is helping kids go to school. So if they can do anything to sanitize the whole process and retain CDF, it will help Kenyans.
The better. And perhaps as you had your take on the NG-CDF, let's talk about the Senate Oversight Fund. And I've had the opportunity to talk to some members of parliament. One of them raised a question in terms of, senators. One of their core functions is oversight, and at times oversight is two-tier, members of county assembly at the county level and senators as well. So what happens if members of county assembly equally push for an oversight fund for them to do their duties? What do you make of this proposal to bring in the Senate Oversight Fund?
That's a loaded question with one Roman 1A, very loaded there. But in theory, one agrees with what the Supreme Court indicated. There are elected leaders are not supposed to have these funds to oversight the resources. But one of the responsibilities of these elected leaders in the National Assembly is that they are legislatures. Okay. They come up with pieces of legislation. And over the past, the Constituency Development Fund has been used as a special purpose vehicle to get political capital and even to win elections. Because people in the villages expect a leader to have resources. Now, for Morai Mososho doesn't care whether or not there are regulations in Nairobi, but they know that using CDF funds, they've gotten bursaries for their children. So this time around, when you come and tell them that, wait a minute, there's been a change, they'll ask you, but are you not a leader? Why can't you go and change the constitution or do whatever it is here? But now the challenge with that, as you've indicated, we may end up having so many funds, and the administrative cost of these funds is going to be so huge that it may end up negating the essence of all these funds. Because every time you create a fund, you need somebody to manage the fund. You're going to get human resources. And sometimes you end up spending as much as 25% of the resources on merely administrative issues. So it beats the purpose. But coming on the oversight of the Senate, one would understand why it's part of the deal, because that is merely a sweetener for the senators to pass it. Because senators are supposed to offer oversight as a corporate, as the Senate. It's not an individual senator who is supposed to be, you go to your county and find out this is what the governor is doing. No, it's supposed to be the corporate body, which is the Senate. Now, giving them resources, allocating them resources, it flies on the face of logic. And also, what is the responsibility of the MCS? This is their core business, the MCS, because sooner than later, even the MCS will say that our responsibility is oversight, but also give us a budget. In fact, we may end up that every single elected leader in Kenya will say that they want a budget for oversight, for legislation and everything else, including sitting and allowances. So in theory, the members of the National Assembly and members of Senate would have kissed by any prospect or any idea of having these resources. Okay. But when you speak to Mura back in the village, or Sadia or Wanjiro, Right now, a number of children have not gone to school, and they keep on calling the members of the National Assembly. Ile pesa iko wapi, ile pesa iko wapi. So maybe what we need is an anthropological change in Kenya for voters to understand that the role of a member of the National Assembly is not to pay school fees. You remember what the Speaker Wetangula indicated, that the moment you get elected, you become an ATM, you become a marriage counselor, you become a mortician, you become all these kind of things, because wherever everything happens in the village, they receive, you get a call. And if you do not respond, that is a guarantee that you are not going to be re-elected.
Jesse, I think what we need to put Senator Wetangula's statement in context. All of us are, even Dismas here, by virtue of just appearing on this show, he is all that combined. And you see, MPs cannot keep telling us as if they are the only ones who are benevolent in their villages. Most people who have some position of influence support where they can. And if you're supporting, we don't go to the government or our employers and say, you need to add us. You know, it is for these MPs to find a way, you know, of ensuring that CDF works. If CDF was working, there wouldn't be all these things. And they cannot hide behind CDF and say that they want control of CDF to have that CDF. They should just argue on the basis of CDF will help people and find a way of removing themselves from CDF. Because the more MPs are interfering with CDF, the more there is conflict of interest in our structure of governance, where at some point you are providing oversight, and at some point you are the one who is distributing resources. So who oversights you? No one.
Jesse, but you know, this now begins from State House. This begins from the Treasury, where, I mean, citizens must understand that whatever money that is brought by leaders is actually our money. Taxpayers. Because you've seen, you know, during campaigns, everybody says, I'm the one who has brought electricity. And another person says, I'm the one who has built this road. So the MCAs will say, I'm the one who did this, you know. It is our money that those people use, and they should not. In fact, there was a debate one time that people should consider, why do you put your portrait on, on the streets of our country, a portrait, when you are advertising about a government service? So the people need to understand clearly there's a distinction between what is your pocket money and what is national, what is money for the public.
Just if I may address that point,
briefly.
We actually discussed the issue of having elected leaders. You put up a road in, say, Lavington, and then you've got a huge billboard, and then with your portrait there. And I challenged him to go to court. He has refused because he's a lawyer.
Interesting. We have to take a break, but I think as we get the final talking point, the final thoughts from you guys, it would be proper to perhaps get your take on the priority areas, not just for the National Assembly going forward, but equally for the national government, because we are beleaguering with a couple of challenges as highlighted on the front page of the Sunday Nation. Talk of drought, inflation, the cost of fuel, whatnot. What should we focus on as we continue? We want to take a short break right now, but thanks for staying with us. You're watching Inside Politics. As we come back, it's all to do with your thoughts back at home. So we'll open our calling lines. Feel free to interact with us. Give us your take on the issues we've been able to canvass during the 1.5 hours so far. Let's take that short break. We'll be back with your views back at home. Stay with us.